Okay, we are recording. Toby, good morning. How is my beautiful hometown of Philadelphia this Sunday morning?
Yeah, good morning. It is pretty nice here today. A little cloudy, but I love summer and I'm glad that it is hot again. So we're in it in a nice way.
Nice. Cool, man.
Yeah.
So we were connected via a mutual friend who kind of heard about the Nouveau podcast and what we're doing and the work you do. They thought it'd be a great alignment. So
Yeah.
what is the work you do and what is your reason for getting into the type of nonprofit world that attempts to make a positive impact as opposed to just kind of pursuing a commercial career or a more traditional path, we could say?
Yeah. Ooh. I love a fun big question at the beginning. I work at, there's a few levels to it. I work at an agency called Lutheran Settlement House. It's like a multi-service nonprofit. So we have like a homeless shelter and a food pantry. And I work in the domestic violence team. And then within that work in the domestic violence world, I do a lot of training, education, how to support and empower survivors of abuse. And then another big part of it is working with men and people who identify with masculinity around recreating what that means in the world, with this understanding that so much of the abuse and violence that we see comes from how we teach boys to be men and comes from living in a patriarchal or male supremacist culture. So that's where I work, or some of what I do at work. And then the whys are ranging for sure, but I come to it from the social justice world. So I got radicalized in college around the aftermath of September 11th and the anti-war movement, and then on from there into other efforts, other movements and groups, and some years of my life moving around the country a lot, but always having a push from sometimes helpful, sometimes painful, but still helpful in the long run, push from people around me to really look at how I was taught to be in the world and the ways that as a cis white man that can show up with a lot of entitlement and a lot of jumping to anger and just things that aren't helpful for groups that I was in, and also, at the end of the day aren't really working for me as an individual or a person either. And so coming to it from those helpful pushes, and then a really impactful moment of losing a friend who was raped and murdered while she was traveling, and really taking a dive into what does it mean to not just respond to violence like that, but to prevent it from happening. So getting into youth education work, and then some years have gone by, and here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess there's a lot of things that are really interesting from that, but when it comes to the youth work you do, what are the populations that you're working with or trying to connect with, and how do you measure success, relative success or failure of those interventions?
Yeah. I mean, it's changed over time somewhat. So when I first started, I was in Arizona, in southern Arizona. And so we would have this model where we would go to a school. It was out of the Rape Crisis Center in Tucson. So we would go to a school and do kind of like a whole grade level assembly kind of thing to talk about consent or healthy relationships, something like that. And then invite people who are interested in doing more to sign up on pass around a sign up sheet. And so it was students who were interested in doing more that we would then spend 6 weeks or 2 months together teaching them this curriculum about gender stereotyping, about consent, and would work with those students who were interested in it to then do peer-led education. So we would teach them the curriculum, how to facilitate, and then go with them to classes at their school, and they would lead the workshops. And so the demographic that stood out most importantly for that group was, these are students who want to do it. And they're coming to us to say, yes, I would like to do more of this. Thanks for coming.
Right.
Now here in Philadelphia, the work that we do with teens is working with schools and embedding in a school within a classroom. So 1 day a week in, Coach Smith's health class or, Miss Simpson's English class, whichever teacher is willing and able at the school. Every Tuesday, we'll see every ninth grader. And so for a whole semester, we'll just be there every Tuesday. And so that demographic, right, it's, whoever they are in the school in terms of the big types of identities. But it's just teenagers by grade level. that we work with now. Yeah.
Awesome. And so is it still this, I guess, what are the principles you're laying out in these sessions?
Yeah, in the youth work, the principles are what are some of the main ones? It's a lot about just relationship skills. So our facilitation or education style is a lot about experiential or direct education. So it's drawing on the lives and the realities of the people that we're with. So it gets a little bit different between groups, but it's talking to them about, well, what do you want in a relationship? What means a healthy relationship to you? And then let's look at that. Be like, oh, how many relationships do you see like that? Or if there's parts of it, it's become a big thing in the past couple of years that having some toxicity in a relationship is important. And that if it's not toxic, it's not real love. And so that's the current. It changes all the time, like what the thing is like struggling with, but that,
Really?
It is wild. Yeah, like in those words exactly, like, oh, that relationship has to be toxic. I mean, there's got to be a little toxicity. Things like that get just thrown out as though.
It's like almost satirical. Because it's so stupid.
What do you mean by that? They're like, yeah, if he doesn't grip you up, if he doesn't whatever. And it's all examples of boys being told that they have to put their hands on someone at least a little bit, with quotes around it, at least a little bit. And young girls being taught that if he doesn't love you, and then all the other problems of the heterosexism inherent in that, but
wow.
It's wild.
Jesus Christ.
And so not just being like, oh, well, great, let's talk about where do you see that, but pushing back on that stuff to look at, well, what is abuse? Abuse is this. How does that tie into what you're saying about you have to put your hands on someone if you love them, right? And then where does that come from? Who does that serve, right? So we work with them for at least a semester, if not the full year, so we can get into some deeper truths around all these stereotypes that they're carrying.
Wow, that it's so interesting because hearing you describe, your, I guess, trajectory starting with, self-described radicalization, and then the kind of like current framing of partisan education politics, I was like, okay, we might be veering towards some territory that's like super like maybe abstract or not even abstract, but contentious. But that is something that I think no one would have any problem counter-educating. So is this like something that comes from kids who are experiencing violence at home and then they tell each other, or is it from social media?
Where did the
or where
idea
does this
of
get perpetuated?
Quote, toxicity in a relationship? I mean, I think it's everywhere, right? So
right.
Yes, it's people telling each other. There's definitely that stereotype, right, that like came up a little bit there in your question around, is it kids who are seeing it at home and then telling other teens? And that, although it is true that people who experience violence do sometimes go on to perpetuate it, I've not had it in my experience be true that a teenager who's witnessing violence in an adult relationship then turn around and tell other people this is what love is. Most often they see it happen and know that something is not good about it. And so they're not then saying this is how it should be, even if later on they enact those same things from that, deeper unconscious place of being like, well, this is what you do, or I don't have a different coping skill when I'm upset and I saw this type of violence happen. But yeah, social media, I think, it's on TV shows, right, in big and small ways. I think every rom-com, right, it's either stalking or it's a lesson in how not to get consent, right, with the no, yes trope all the time of, guy pursues girl, which is the only way they usually go, and then she says no, then she says yes. And so that's just in the world of, this is what it is to be in a relationship. You just push for it until you get what you want. And then you roll in, especially looking at this world and how boys are taught to get what we want and that we deserve to get what we want and all of that. It leads to violence, super fast. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of so many stories I've heard from women, from my friends, just about how that is. And it's whittling someone down to where they're so distressed that agreeing to do something just to get you away from them
definitely not
is
okay.
not okay.
And
Yeah.
definitely not
Yeah.
great, right? We can agree there, and then you can look at
to put it
the
lightly.
deeper truth under that of
yeah.
it's hard to talk about because I don't want to. There's not parity. It is not equal in any way. The pressure that people are under, especially if we're just talking men and women and just talking heterosexual relationships, where there is a pressure that women are under, right? And a lot of fear of like actual violence and all of that. Whereas me as a man, I don't face those same kinds of fears. And there is a pressure that I also feel of, well, if I don't come back to my boys with the story of sleeping with you, or at least getting a date, whatever it is, then I'm going to face some consequences from them. And again, not equal, but there's pressure there. And that's when we talk about how this system doesn't actually work for any of us. That's some of that truth, you know. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, because it also, working backwards, one, it's so interesting because, again, this sounds like high school because literally you're working with high schoolers. But these behaviors, I think, repeat themselves in adulthood. And then they even into past, like, young adulthood, into marriages, and then families, and then workplaces.
Here we are, decades.
And then the kids are learning it. And it's like, for sure. Because, like, kids acting out doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's part of a longer cycle of life. And where are they learning these things?
Yeah, they definitely didn't make it up.
They didn't just make it up.
Yeah, I think I couldn't do this work without that outlook that it's not just human nature or something like that, but this is learned behavior. If it can be learned, it can be unlearned, it can be taught in different ways. We can find other ways and teach ourselves and each other other ways to be together.
Yeah. So when it comes to specifically, I guess, sexual violence, that's something that just my own temperature check, I feel like the information about how common it is becoming more common knowledge, but it's still not really discussed with any nuance or frequency. So what are some of the kind of facts around sexual violence, and why do you think it is extremely prevalent, or why does it happen?
Let's see some of the facts. I think the main, I'm not big on statistics. I don't think numbers do a lot for us, and there's many ways to look at them. And one that still impacts me is that just thinking of the United States, it's every 96-ish seconds on average someone is sexually assaulted here in the U.S. because it just happens so much and so often. So every minute and a half someone's being sexually assaulted here in the U.S. Yeah, it's happening a lot. And I've asked a lot of groups. I've never had anyone say yes, but I've asked a lot of groups, who here thinks rape is okay? Who here thinks sexual assault is okay? Right? No one ever says yes. No one raises their hand to be like, oh yeah, it's fine. I'm chill with it. Yeah. And so squaring that circle, or however that saying goes, right? Making sense of it, to be like, okay, it's happening literally all the time, and no one thinks it should be happening. So what's going on here? And I think there's a lot, right? It's a really deep question that doesn't have a single answer. I think for me, it's come down to a lot around gender stereotyping and gender norms, right? The ways that we teach boys to be men and the world that we create based off of that. So some of the stuff that has come up already around the no, yes type trope in rom-coms and other movies, and just teaching all the time that, no actually means yes. And, with that stereotype of boys and men, all we want is sex all the time. Girls and women don't want it, and they're supposed to be the gatekeepers. And that isn't true. And then if you walk in with this explicit or even implicit view of a potential relationship, it just sets everyone up for failure, where I'm not believing you when you say you don't want it. I just think that you don't think you can say you do want it. It gets all twisted around. And so I'm just going to keep pushing like I've been told to push.
Right.
Until if you keep saying no, then, well, I'm going to take it, right? I'm entitled to what I want. How can you tell me no? Stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great teaching tool. And you know what's so interesting too is like, I think it's this whole, the whole idea of women are supposed to shyly or bashfully say no, but they really want it, and men are supposed to want it all the time.
Right.
Like, I've never been told that explicitly, but when you said that, it clicked in my brain. Kind of similar to the whitewashing of beauty standards, for example.
Right.
There are no billboards saying white is beautiful. Maybe there used to be, but not in my lifetime. But still, when I think about
there it is.
how beauty is portrayed for the most part in mass media, what do I see?
Exactly.
It's white people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So a lot of that gets to nonverbal communication too.
And I think there's something around those messages, the views that are out there. Some of it is verbal, but it's not directed. Like, no one sat me down and was like, hey, Toby, act like this. And I think we could probably each come up with dozens of, however many examples of times that I was told to man up or to act like a man. And that was very explicit, even if what that actually meant was unsaid. Mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm a boy and I'm crying and I'm told to man up. I know that means
super
don't
abstract.
cry, don't show my emotions, be tough, be strong, handle it, walk it off. But all that got said was man up, right? And same thing when you're like, oh, I have a crush on this person, and a friend is like, yo, man up. You going to say something or what, right? Now I know, okay, there's this pressure that if I step outside of that man box and say, ooh, I'm feeling nervous, that's not allowed, right? And depending on your friend group, you could face actual physical violence, if not shunning and all this other stuff, to not keep pushing for it. Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. So I think we're on the same wavelength when it comes to that. There are a lot of people, men in particular, who are super dismissive of this philosophy, if you could call it, or just way of being, really. It's not even a philosophy.
Nice
I guess that's a philosophical question, is a way of being a philosophy. But how do you engage with someone? I mean, do you even try to change people's minds who don't see the value in kind of questioning conditioned behavior?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to.
And if you do, how do you
engage with them? We're not going to get free with just
them?
a few of us thinking it's a cool idea. Yeah. And I'm not going to pretend like it's easy or we do it all the time, right? We have a group called the Masculinity Action Project here, and the people who find their way to us are the ones who do want to talk about it and are interested. Right. And that is a lot of what we end up doing. And to connect to other people, I think in part, right, let's keep it on this meta tip for a second, is to connect to the parts of myself that struggle with challenging it, that don't want to. And recognizing that I have some of that still now, and I used to have a lot more. Mm-hmm. And if I can find that empathy and remember for myself what got me here, that's a big piece of it. And then the other big piece is just meeting people where they're at. And so we have a tool or a framework that we use, or kind of twisted from, it was in the social work field, the stages of change. Is that something that you're familiar with or have heard about? Stages of change. Very fair. It talks about, it's from the world of, again, social work and more like the addiction or recovery
I'm interested.
Type space. We're thinking about someone who's an alcoholic or struggles with any kind of addiction. There's a time, maybe it's a lot of time, where they don't think they have a problem at all. And then they start to realize oh, maybe this isn't great. Maybe I want to do something, right? I'm moving along these steps. Maybe I'm going to actually try and make a change. Maybe I'm going to maintain that change now, this new way of being. And all throughout that, it's not actually that linear, right? You relapse and be like, I thought it was a problem, but really I think it's fine. Let's go out. Pardon, whatever it might be. And so taking that same mindset of the path of there's no problem to maintaining a new way of being, and just clocking other people and be like, where are you at along these steps? And I'm going to meet you there. Oh, you think that everything is fine. And I'm going to ask, like, does it really work for you right now? What parts of how you were taught to be a man means you're cutting off your own humanity? You're performing something that doesn't really fit. Let's look at that a little bit, or I'll just plant that seed. And, it's going to take a few times, but at some point people are like, oh, this isn't great. What else is out there, right? And then we can talk about, well, here's some other ways of being. And so it can be challenging. In the beginning stages are very focused on the individual and the other person. And at some point we do have to turn that corner to not just the harm done to us, but the harm that we've done to other people. And that can be another one of those moments that people want to, disappear and not actually look at that. But it's things like that. It's that personal connection that can do it.
Yeah. I think for me it would be just really, what's the word?
Yeah.
Inconsiderate or manipulative things I may have done when I was single and dating. I think that's one of my, thinking about it through that, like turning the corner and like, knowing like hurting people's feelings.
Yep.
Another one for me would just be, and the reason I'm sharing these is because I think that people could identify with them, would be just saying things that I thought were funny or maybe thought was fine or just a joke and like really hurting someone's feelings. And I think among men, those two I would imagine are, it could be my
I'm with you there.
confirmation biase, but I would imagine those are pretty common.
And from other people, like, oh yeah.
You know,
the jokes that we can tell to make someone else feel small to make myself feel okay. Once you start looking at that, can be really painful.
Yeah.
And then, we get to decide, and I don't know how it's gone for you, but having to decide, like, is it more painful to look at that stuff and own it and find the way through those hard feelings? Or is it more painful to turn back into the man box and keep cutting off myself and my real humanity? And that's that decision point. And it's really hard to decide to look at and hold those hard feelings if you're doing it alone in isolation. It's much easier to be like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll keep pretending that I like sports so that my friends don't call me gay. And I'll keep, doing whatever it is, even if I don't want to, because that's easier than having to own, like, oh, shit, I did pressure X number of girls to sleep with me when they maybe didn't want to. And who am I in the world if I'm the type of person that would sleep with someone who didn't want to? That's hard, especially alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
Kind of keep,
so the opposite of alone would be,
there's some gold standard out there, and this type
friends,
of work
with a support group,
doing it with other
anyone,
men and masculine people.
Okay. Because
we're the ones that are in it together. And a lot of times what happens is, especially those of us who are heterosexual, we'll put it on our female partners to be like, ooh, I feel bad about this, right? Like, nurture me and take care of me. Exactly. Still not alone. It can, get what we can
make
get.
Me feel better.
And learn better, do better. So I know I did a lot of that with past partners.
Yeah.
And have had to go back and name and own. Like, hey, in my undoing this stuff, I did more of it. In my undoing earlier patriarchy, I then leaned on you in a way that put you in a position of just caretaking me. And I'm sorry about that, right? Make those.
Oh, really?
It's been up and down for sure. Yeah.
How did that go? Yeah, because that's also like.
Yeah.
I would imagine it comes to that decision point of like, is it worth even going back or just letting it be for the other person?
I don't know. I mean, there's not an answer.
Like,
right?
what's the time horizon?
Relationship with this
Is
person?
it like a year? Is it 2 years?
I've learned a little bit more now, and I know when we were together, this is probably a bummer for you. Do you want to tell me anything about how that was? And I can apologize for it. Some people had someone not respond. Others be like, no, things were okay. And someone would be like, yeah, that did suck. I didn't want to do all that caretaking work. Thanks for acknowledging it, at least now. You know. So, yeah, it runs the gamut.
Wow.
But,
That's huge of you, man. Good for you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I had a similar situation where
Yeah.
I think made a comment of something like
yeah.
about like sex basically, and being like, oh, wish the sex could be this way, or some stupid shit like that.
Yep.
And then I went through a bout of sexual discomfort,
Nice.
like performance anxiety, feeling
Wow.
anxious in my own skin and stuff. And then I was like, oh my god, like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, that was such an asshole thing to say to you.
Yeah. Wow, how
It
did that go?
took me having this
That's
experience to
amazing.
develop a little empathy,
Yeah.
but I'm sorry, and I just want to tell you
Get
that.
it.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I also want to honor, like, I see you.
Great.
It looks like you feel kind
Yeah.
of embarrassed.
Yeah,
or
she was
a little
like, thank you. Yeah. So,
that's real. Yep.
Yeah. Because it's, my podcast, but it's good because it kind of gets the whole point of why I do this,
Right.
because
And I don't want to just keep the spotlight on you.
there's
I
going to be
do
someone
want to offer
listening
that if
who
you
this really
didn't
resonates
care,
with
you wouldn't
and
feel embarrassed.
helps them in some
So
way.
I found it
know?
helpful to reframe. Oh, I feel guilty about that. I feel embarrassed about it because I care, because I want to do better, and that can really fuel me to get through those feelings and be willing to go that direction instead of just turn away from it and be like, well, this embarrassment, this guilt, shame feels too bad, so I'm gonna just ignore it, stuff it down. But to actually be like, nope, it matters. It's important. I'm here with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like similar to like the radical honesty thing was like this accountability.
Ooh.
Yeah. So while we're on like the relationship bent, one thing that's really curious to me is jealousy. And for you, how much is too much jealousy?
Huh, that's interesting
And
to
how
think
do you
about.
kind of
Too
coach
much
or
versus like
help the
any
guys
amount of,
who
enough
really
or
deal with
none,
it?
or where are you in there? It's definitely nuanced, which is always fun, right?
Enough.
I guess
Yeah.
the thing that popped into my mind was thinking about a definition, or like what is an abusive relationship, or what is domestic violence, and it's about power and control, right? An abusive relationship is where one person is able to control the other one. And so when it reaches the level of control, when I am stopping you from doing things that you would like to do in your life because of my own feelings, right? If I'm controlling your movement, your behavior, your clothing, your whatever, because of my feelings, if your life is getting smaller because of me, that feels like maybe, a step or two past a red flag even, and into, we might call that an abusive relationship if my jealousy means you have to do these things. The real trick, right, getting into even more of the nuance is, well, what if someone is okay with it, or they say they're okay with it, and they're like, oh, well, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, so sure, I won't have this, girls' night out, or whatever the example might be. That's where, again, getting back into community and having people in life to talk about it with, and be like, oh, I really don't like it when my partner, I'm struggling with a real example, so I'll just keep with the goes out with her friends. They have a once a month on a Friday, they all go out for the whole night, and they're just out at clubs dancing and drinking, and I don't know what's going on. Makes me feel weird and bad, so she said she would skip it next month. Right? If I was a good friend of that person, I'd be like, why does that feel bad for you? Right? Because at the root of why are you jealous usually is a lack of trust. And, we can keep going from there around like, oh, well, yeah, I trust my girlfriend. I don't trust the other guys. Be like, cool, why don't you trust other guys? Oh, we're in this patriarchal world. Well, what parts of you saying she can't go out drinking and dancing with her friends reinforces that world of patriarchy where men are this controlling, unsafe group to be around? The road would never end, but we could get there together and walk along it for a while. Huh. Yeah, that's real.
For sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think for me, feelings of jealousy come from inadequacy, the feelings of inadequacy, rather than a trust thing, you know? Because when I think about my jealous feelings,
Right.
it's because, you know, in my subconscious brain, it's like, oh, like, he has something you don't, therefore she will do X, Y, Z, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and so again, like, I like this because it's a kind of a more concrete example of why self-love matters.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it's so true, you know, like all of the freaking
why it really matters.
stereotypes or cliches. Like, you can't love anyone else until you love yourself. But like,
I don't know about.
this is for me a very good example of like why.
I don't know about you, but I do know for me
why it really matters.
The way I was taught what it means to be a man didn't leave the door open for much self-love.
No, thanks. Yeah.
Right? It meant a lot of doing this performance or else. Not be who I want to be and love that person. And I don't know about a lot of traditional masculinity being a good pathway to self-love. Has that been your... Yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, because I think it... Also, like, we have a very American perspective.
Toby over here.
And I think, too, our, like, I think I'm a bit younger than you. No shade. But I think, like, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, it's all post-war mindset. You know, it's like post-depression mindset, and all of that is related to industry and the United States is a rising power and the importance of earning money. You know, so I think that's a big, and that also ties in with probably the older evolutionary or sociological role of men as providers and protectors. But yeah, no, I think I was able to express myself, and I think I was very blessed to have a healthy way to explore masculinity. Although I would admit that I don't want to call it an Achilles heel, but like I love playing rugby.
Yeah, no one can say you're not
and
a
I
real
think
man.
that gives me like a safe space to do this, is because I'm also on a Saturday playing rugby, you know, and like all of the archetypal masculine things. So I have that comfort. Yeah. Exactly. So I do have an awareness of that, and I'm like, what's going to happen to me when I can't play rugby anymore?
Yeah, so many of us have.
And I'm not actually worried about it because I'm comfortable in my own skin enough, I think.
No shade.
But I am very aware of that.
Was a ballet dancer, was professionally up to his mid-20s, which is when a lot of them end up dropping out, and also rides a motorcycle, right? And it just feels like in a similar way, right? Like,
oh, cool.
Yeah, exactly, right? Be like, oh, if I'm going to be a ballet dancer, I'll also ride a motorcycle. And there are plenty of other reasons that, you know, I guess I've never had one, but apparently motorcycles are very fun. So I don't want to boil it down to here's something, or that you don't just play rugby because you need to prove that you're a man. And it doesn't hurt, right? I exercise and lift weights and similar. I'm just like, oh yeah, okay. There's part of me that still fits in. And that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's super...
Yeah.
To me, I'm at a point now where it's like, I don't need to look at it through the paradigm of masculinity necessarily. It's just something I enjoy.
Yep.
And, like, also, like, our bodies are made to move and have the capacity to hold muscle.
See what it can
and our lungs have the capacity to expand and increase our VO2 max and do badass shit. Like, we have an amazing engineered machine at our disposal, and not using it. Yeah, exactly. I think not using it is in the same family
Safe
as
space would
not
be shame sciencey all day with me.
the,
Yeah.
psychosocial, probably to use like a sham science word, but not to examine. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good one.
I want to put a pin in from what we were just talking about. If it also
There's
gets
a lot,
into
man.
what are we fighting for.
Tell me more about your
in this world. Like, are we fighting
masculine modeling growing up?
I don't think I'm fighting to just throw masculinity in the garbage, because there's been these harms caused by it. And so that's why, for me, I'm like, whatever, I can fit in the box sometimes if I want to be in it, and I can do other stuff too. And so anyway, we could get there at some point. But for me, as a young person, I also feel pretty lucky. I think I heard you say that you felt pretty lucky about some of the models you had. And similar, I grew up in a, not always in the healthiest way, but a really matriarchal house where my mom's mom and my mom were very much the people like in charge of what we were doing. When I would get in trouble, it was my mom who was much more violent, and my dad who would cry and be disappointed. So, there's lots of unhealthy bad things in there, sad things in there. And the modeling of, men are allowed to cry was kind of there. Like, I was allowed to cry, but I had to do it in private. So I got some steps in a healthier direction. And definitely had a lot of really strong women around me that I think lined up for me, just opening my eyes to questioning the things that I was seeing in those implicit messages all over of damsel in distress style, like, women just need saving. And then I would look to my family and be like, that doesn't feel true. What else isn't true? Not always super conscious, but it was there. I wasn't a big sports guy or person. My dad only watches sports, doesn't care what it is, and I always found that stuff just so god-awfully boring to watch a sport. But I did run track, and our coach was also really great. And Coach Deep, shout out to Coach Deep, Clinton, New York, on the track team, was very much explicitly about, we're a team, we don't just need the person to win, we're going to work together, and have a lot of people who come in second and third, and that's great because you're still getting points on the board, and everyone plays a part in making this team go, whether you're cheering someone on because they're faster than you or you're fast yourself, whatever it is. And so I feel like, I got a lot of good messages, while at the same time, we were also in the locker room calling each other gay and other worse slurs, and ridiculing bodies. I was really skinny as a kid, and so getting bullied in that way. And to this day, I hate hockey, because my town, hockey was the big sport, and all these hockey jocks would just like shove people into the lockers when they walked by. But from my positioning, it was like, that's gross. I don't like how that's done to me, and I don't want to do that to someone else. And so, had some good seeds planted. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. That's really interesting, that juxtaposition. Like the fun fit.
Nice. Yeah, that's really. Thanks for sharing that. It's really interesting, the kind of juxtaposition of like the father figure showing emotion, the mother being strong, and then kind of being contradicted in the outside world. And what you said about like the being allowed to cry, but only privately, reminded me of, we had this retreat we would do at our high school, and there was a time when you'd get like letters from family and stuff, sweet. And everyone reads it. And when I went, everyone we kind of like all got our letters in the same room, and everyone got to read them, and everyone was processing their emotions however they came up. And I had this friend. Yeah, it was awesome. I had this friend who went, and he was somebody who I feel like had a lot of like archetypal in a bad way masculine modeling at home. And he, for some reason, when they went, had them do exactly what you said, go to like rooms and read the letters.
Yeah, because I feel like that's where it came.
And now,
in my
some kind of weird like
gender was getting,
I feel like that was like a missed opportunity for him as a person.
Not being the main strong figure in that
like-
particular way. And then it was whiteness that
Oh,
came in
yeah,
to
yeah.
be like, emotions are for private. We don't do that with other people. If you're in public, it's you're put together. You know, all of those kinds of messages of whiteness. So it was this like blend for as a white boy. So I wonder for this friend if it was the gender thing or the whiteness thing, how they get parsed out and together at the same time. You know?
Right.
Yeah. Oh my god. Wow, I've heard of that. How
Yeah.
was that? I've heard of other people.
We would,
and
like,
for me, I'm just like, that
Just go to
sounds
his house and like put
terrifying
on boxing gloves and just like
to do.
punch each
Yeah.
other. So more I think the gender.
Like being a kid and be like, well, I don't want to, but I have to.
But
Really?
like sparring.
Yeah.
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 I wasn't like
Yeah.
I wasn't
Fair.
like
Yeah.
I was down. Like I would, you know, now I wouldn't do it anymore because
Right.
I know more about like brain trauma.
Yeah.
But I like wrestling and, you know, like me and my friends get drunk and like we all like wrestle and
Yeah.
like, you know, like with like stepbrother and stuff. Like we always just I like that stuff. And I think it too is to circle back around to what we said about like
Yep.
the role for masculinity. I think that's hugely valuable too. And
Yep. Yeah,
also, I
great.
guess even more
and that's
importantly,
the
it's
tears is what gets lost
giving people the
in our
space
culture,
to be and
in
express
the
how they
U.S.
want
culture,
to
I'll
be.
say. Where
You
it's
know?
like, oh, you don't want to
If-
do
if
that.
a
It's because
guy's
you're
not super
plain,
sexual
or
and doesn't
get out there, pussy.
want
or,
to do
you know, whatever
MMA, like
dumb,
cheers.
horrible thing.
That's
Yeah.
totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So dumb. Yeah. I heard a great. This is a retell, but I haven't told this story in a long time on the pod. So I was in where were we? We were in Truckee, which is
Yeah.
up in Lake Tahoe Town in Northern
Yeah.
California, and I was sitting in a cafe, and I heard this woman on the phone.
dang.
She's like power bossing it, like on the phone, barking orders, yeah, you know, doing whatever. And I heard her say she's like a leader or captain of a wildfire crew up
Right.
there. And she was talking about
Oh, no.
like how her guys, I think it was mostly men on her team, and how they
Yeah.
all saw a lot of horrible things over the last few years with the wildfires, and their mental health was struggling, and they were seeing suicides and stuff.
Yeah.
So I went up to her, gave her my card, and was like, "Hey, I have a podcast. You know,
Right.
put some of your guys onto it." And then she was
Follow the
launched
ground,
in this
yeah.
whole diatribe about how when guys say "don't be a pussy," they should really say "don't be a sack." She's like, a pussy gets
I've
fucked
definitely
hard
heard
and
that
takes
joke or
it,
that
but a
trope
sack
before.
you just tap it
This
once
is
and you
so-
go on the ground
What a good
crying.
example
you
of
know?
how twisted patriarchy
I was like, wow, you
is.
just said that in a public.
We're
Cool.
very
Like,
sensitive. You're just putting it out
You're
there.
cool.
They're like, no, we don't feel anything. Yeah, no, balls are tough. No. It's true. It's the exact opposite. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, so that's great. That's so awesome that you kind of do this all the time, and I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell you're like very
It's so hard
well
to sum up.
versed, and it's
Yeah.
one of those
Yeah,
things.
tell
I feel like this whole
myself
concept,
sometimes you're like,
you
oh, I'll
almost
get an
have to
elevator
get into a
pitch one day.
conversation to
Like, yo, it's
understand
gotta
it.
be
Like
an
trying
elevator
to
and a skyscraper.
describe what you do in two sentences
I don't know.
is not easy. Yeah. Nice. So how?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I mean, on the self-work,
So how
it's
can
that connection
someone
and community building.
get involved?
So,
Whether
I
that
think just
be
like
their
you
own
and I have
self-work
done
or
here today, and just
affecting
doing that with
policy,
more of your guy friends, just take that,
you know, what are some resources you would direct them to?
take the step to be vulnerable and see how it pays off, right? And if it doesn't pay off, maybe that's not the community to be in all the time, but finding those guys that you can be real and honest with and be like, oh, this is hard for me. can just go, leaps and bounds towards healing, as can therapy. Shouts to therapy day in, day out, really getting with someone who's trained in helping people discover and uncover what's inside, I think are just the two most important things for that self-work. There are groups like the Masculinity Action Project all across the country and world. There's definitely groups all over the place of men and masculine people getting together and learning together, doing that political education, all that good stuff. So just doing some Googling in your town, wherever you're based. There's also, if you're US based and you're white, there's a group called Organizing White Men for Collective Liberation that has monthly events and calls that get into the hundreds of guys coming together to have these vulnerable conversations together. And thanks to technology and Zoom, being able to go into a breakout group with a smaller group and one facilitator to help lead it and coming back together to hear talks and others speak. So Organizing White Men for Collective Liberation is a good spot. And then in terms of policy change and shifts, it's honestly really tough. There's not a mainstream feminist movement that has a direction these days, right? In the 80s and 90s, early 90s, there was the fight for the Equal Rights Amendment that gave this movement a lot of direction. Nowadays, right, like we talked about, these messages are explicit and implicitly everywhere around us. So anywhere you look, there could be a thing to do that would help shift the culture that leads to all of this violence. But a lot of what we suggest folks do is get involved with any group. In my view of gender justice, what it is to be involved in gender justice organizing is to be a man in a group that's even led by women, even if it's fighting for housing rights, right? You can make the connection back, but just the practice of being a man, taking the leadership, listening to the leadership of women can be a part of that while fighting for social good. I think abortion rights are a thing that is super important and imperative for us as people who can't get pregnant to be really strong voices for, and to look to all the ways that there are so many policy, legal, and electoral fights happening for that. So it's pretty broad ranging when it gets to the policy side. Just getting involved is the key step. Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the race.
Yeah.
The whiteness, more specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, the few terms that were very considerate. So,
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. That sounds awesome. I want to come back
Yeah.
to the race, the whiteness more specifically.
Yeah.
But you've used a few terms that are very considerate. So masculine identifying,
Heyo.
and then people like us who cannot get pregnant. And there's a huge pushback in the culture wars about these terms.
Yep.
It's I was thinking with PSA, if those types of terms bother you, grow up. How much skin is it off of your ass to use your brain for a second and be a little empathetic and considerate to other people? If you don't want to do it, it's. Of course, no one can make anyone.
Yeah.
We all have our rights
so,
to say
and I
and
think you
believe
need
we
to
want to
do-
believe.
Right,
But
I think actually
if you are
another
so
piece in there
selfish
is that
and egotistical
there's a
that
part of you that
you
feels hurt
don't want
because
to
you wanted
make a
that
small
concession
tweak to
made
make
in some
someone
way
else
for
feel
you in your life
uncomfortable,
and you didn't get it.
then
And
you're
so
just an
like,
asshole.
Fuck you, you don't get it either. And it's not really about saying pregnant people or people who can get pregnant or can't get pregnant. It's about some deeper shit. And so, one, grow up, but also go to therapy and find out why this thing bothers you, because that is not the thing that's the issue. And it's not the problem. Yeah.
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 Yes. Yes. Wow. Excellent. That's a excellent clip.
Yeah.
Okay. So the whiteness thing, that's another one that white people get triggered by. And
Yep.
in some ways, I can understand it. It's uncomfortable to look at the world that one was born into and have to acknowledge that there are a lot of privileges and disadvantages that other people face that I don't face. But
Right.
yeah, so how do you go about approaching someone who like a white person or
Yeah.
man or
I mean,
woman or
it's
whatever
a
gender
sadly boring answer
who kind of doesn't
like,
believe
same
in,
as
say, let's say, the privilege of white people or
says that they don't or struggle with
systemic
it, right? It's meeting
prejudice
them where they're
or
at.
unconscious bias or
I think there's
systemic
the
racism in the United
the
States.
phrase
Like, how do
curiosity,
you
not
engage
correction.
with them?
And so finding out from them what is going on here, right? So much of the time, pardon me, so much of the time in my experience, people who don't want to look at white privilege, it's because they really want to look at the struggles that they've had and have those struggles be honored. And if I can give them just a little bit of time to say, can you tell me more about that? That does sound really hard. And validate that and then say, was that because you are white? Or something else? It can really open up a lot of doors inside of them to be like, oh, maybe it's not because I was white, but I have had troubles, right? And if you can get someone else to offer that curiosity back, now we're cooking, right? Now we're really getting into it. And if not, then it was just one of those times where a seed got planted and today wasn't the day. I can't think of a deeply held belief of my own that changed from one conversation. And so being able to stay in it with people and to have other white folks in my own life where I can express the like frustration and anger with, you know, this person over here who didn't want to listen to me, instead of getting angry at them and pushing them away. If I can keep them close and get a place to vent over on the other side, that's great if I can. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, man. I think that's such a good, that's a fantastic answer because I think the problem with the way that a lot of the anti-racist theory and kind of modalities are presented is that they're kind of hard line in their presentation.
Yeah.
Which I can understand in some ways because having shock value sparks conversation and gets people talking. But kind of similar to, obviously related, like looking at like President Trump's election and like the white nationalist ethos and like theme of his presidency is because poor white people weren't getting their due or the recognition of, hey, like our lives are fucking hard too. And he tapped into that.
Right. Yeah. Just saying that. Yeah.
So,
and I think the other part for
having
us
that empathy and being like, yes, I understand.
Sometimes I view it just like, oh, this is my role.
Your human
and part of my job
experience.
is to take those angry words.
And exactly like you said. That's amazing, man. Thank you. I think that's a really excellent template.
Like, be authentic.
And
be
it's also
yourself, say how
repeatable.
you want to say, and it's my role to help translate that to the people who are turned off by it. Right? It's not your fault for being mad. Shit is angering for Black people and people of color. That makes sense. I don't want you to cut off even more of your humanity than you have to in this culture. So be authentic there and let me do the work to get that into the minds and the curiosity of people who are turned off by it right now. You know?
Yeah.
It's tough, but it's real. Yeah, we're in it, right? Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Yeah, it's super real. Yeah, it's valuable. It's super valuable. Well, thank you, Toby. I usually end with a conversation game. I can't find it right now, so I'll just spitball a question, and maybe you can ask me one back.
I'm gonna say a dog
we'll do it live
right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why, but that just sounds.
If you could have
really
any
fun.
savant level skill, what would it be?
Yeah, I think less craft that dog into the picture perfect one of the person that takes care of them, and more just able to understand and be like, this is what's happening for that dog.
So you mean like someone who could take a wild dog, like a unruly dog, and
just to be able to look and be able to understand and then communicate.
Get them.
Sounds awesome. If it's not in the world of superpowers where like somehow I can talk and they can talk to me, then yeah. Ooh, okay. If you could change one thing about your current setup to just like get even more rest and care into your life, what are you going to shift?
Yeah. That'd be sick.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, dude. My setup in San Francisco is so dank. Because I could get up early, go swim or work out in the bay, and then start work. And then go to bed early. Or in the nights I didn't have rugby, and I had rugby nights, go to bed later. But, it was great. So right now I'm overseas, as I told you. So I'm working till like 2, 3 a.m. And
that can be a big
it's kind of brutal because I'm a morning person. Yeah. So that's what I'm kind of figuring out how to approach, because it's enabling me to be here and have a good experience,
that leads to the
which is
other
hugely
healthy
valuable. But
aspects,
it's
like
also
when your
I don't
schedule
want
is
to
messed
compromise
up,
my
then having
health.
like exercise and body movement doesn't happen as much.
So that would be it, man. Just back to the asleep at 10, up at 6. That's
yeah. Yeah. Right. Wow. Yeah.
It still happens, but
it's like, oh my God.
I think I prefer to get up and start the day with it, because then it's like 8 a.m. and I'm all stoked. I got 600 calories burned. I just saw a seal in the fucking water.
Yeah,
I'm all stoked.
Yeah, bit of clarity you're able to give yourself.
Yeah. Don't eat me. Yeah. So I would say that. I think that's good to know, though, right? Because it's good to know.
Call to action
the rest of my life. That's like a schedule that works for me.
Definitely come check us out at the Masculinity Action Project. So we are newly on the Instagram.
Yes, thanks, man.
The cool kids. So it's at.
Okay, Toby, where can the good people find your work?
And if you're not,
or
just do some
where
Googling.
would you send them? What's your
healthy masculinity?
call to action?
Sometimes what people call it, plus your city, or men's work in your city, or anti-violence or violence prevention, plus your city name. Find that, and then connect with the men in your life. What's the thing that you want to connect with, but you're nervous you'll get called some kind of slur, gay or whatever, if you do it, and just take that risk. That's my call to action. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Thomas.
Awesome. Thank you, Toby. Have an awesome day. Thanks for being on the pod.